Welcome to the Further Light Podcast, presented by Wisconsin Freemasonry, helping you accomplish your Masonic goals through education and more light. And now, I present to you, Brother Chris Ludke.
Listeners, scholars, brothers, this is Brother Chris Ludke, and today I want to explore where to learn more about Masonry. Really, what are some of the references, some of the places that you can go to learn more about the craft, the lessons of the craft, the ideas behind it. Receiving the degrees of Masonry is your first introduction to the symbols, lessons, and allegories of the craft. Each degree, of course, has its unique symbols, lectures, and generally some form of charge. The amount of information that you receive during your degrees is more than anyone can absorb in one sitting, and that's a really important point, because I think all of us have sat there at some point and gone, wow, did everyone else get this and I didn't? And the truth is, most people don't memorize everything there. I can't say no one, but it's pretty unlikely. There's a lot of information. It's this constant idea of the use of metaphor and allegory to veil the mysteries of Freemasonry. And so it means that, well, there's a lot there to work with. Every time you witness a degree, hear the lectures, you will discover something new. Further study and research are necessary to fully appreciate the intricacies, details, and deeper meaning contained in each. A question you might ask is, where can I go for more information? This presentation will introduce you to some of the resources that are available to you to continue your education. And what I'm working with today is a script that was put together. It's been modified. I've altered it a bit, but it was put together for a program back in 2021 called Freemasonry 101, where we, Jerry Reich, myself, Bob Roth, Frank McKenna, Pat Choka, and others were involved trying to put out education for people during the COVID crisis and put together a webinar on the topic. I'm using material that Worshipful Brother Jerry Reich put together, and it's fantastic material. I have altered it. I've added material to it just to fill out some of the spots, but I think it works very well, and so I do want to make sure that I'm giving credit where credit's due. So, there are many learned expositors of Masonry. Some have dedicated their lives to studying the craft, perfecting the ritual, and deciphering its deeper meanings. There are volumes of books, literally millions of pages, that have been written about Masonry, going back as far as the 1700s, and coming all the way forward to present, which seek to articulate its hidden mysteries. There's a wealth of educational and informational resource available to you at the lodge, district, and Grand Lodge level. There's also a huge amount of information online. But since the sources cannot always be verified, it is recommended that you first seek out information from learned brothers and build the foundation of your knowledge from trusted sources. You will then be able to easily decipher the truth from fiction. The problem with many of the websites, first of all, many of them plagiarize each other on a regular basis without giving credit. And secondly, you get a lot of information that's questionable. Masons, like anyone else, will suffer from confirmation bias. They are so tied into trying to prove a specific point, a specific argument, that they can't see the information that disproves them. And therefore, they will prove it, but it's not a good case. It's not well-rounded. It's not well thought out and fully fleshed out. So when you're using internet sources, use things like Grand Lodges, and we'll go into some others as well. There are others that I won't list because there's probably millions of websites that involve Masonry out there. But just be careful. Use common sense. If you find a claim that sounds extraordinary, just remember that an extraordinary claim requires extraordinary evidence. So let's explore some of the offerings that are available. Let's start with the lodge. So your first, best, and closest resource for information about Masonry is going to be your lodge. Talk to your mentor, counselor, and new brothers. Ask them questions about Masonry in general, the lessons you've received, the symbolism we use, the ritual, and what goes on during your lodge communications. You can look at specific things. For example, the posting. The Masonic Light series, or posting books, is provided to all new Masons and is your introductory study material about the degrees that you have received. All new Masons are required to study and demonstrate basic proficiency in each of the degrees. Your mentor, counselor, and other brothers will be available to work with you to go through each study guide. They are also great resources because usually the people who will work with you as a mentor will know more than what's just in those books, which means you can ask why. In the obligation, why do I say this? Or why do we do this thing? That is going to be a huge part of your posting. Don't overlook it. And if you've not done that, if you memorized it or whatever the situation is, go back and look at the posting sometime. Just read through it. I promise you, it will inspire questions in you, questions that your lodge counselor or others will be more than happy to answer. In terms of education, it should be part of every lodge meeting. If you don't see it on the agenda, ask your worshipful master or counselor about it. Enough has been written about Masonry to fill a library. In fact, your lodge probably has a library of books about Masonry. I will tell you that many of the lodges that I've visited and the lodges I'm a member of, many of them have libraries. Waukesha has a pretty good library. Oconomowoc has a pretty strong library. And these are places where you can go in. Usually there's an informal process of some sort of checking books out. Maybe they keep a list. Maybe you write down what you took, whatever the situation is. And just make sure that someone knows, the lodge secretary, an officer, etc. And go read about it. And some of the books are fantastic. Some of them are really hard to get through because people are trying to show how smart they are rather than trying to educate their audience. And that's fine. Just be aware of it. If your particular lodge doesn't have a library, I guarantee you other lodges in your district will. So you can speak to your lodge officers about what might be available and how to check books out. By the way, speaking of libraries, even though it's not a lodge library, there are libraries at Green Bay and at Madison, at the Wisconsin Masonic Center in Madison, has a great library. If you give them a call, you can get in touch with Worshipful Brother Michael Heidke, and he can get you in there so that you can look at the materials, look at the archives. They have an impressive collection. They currently house the Grand Lodge collection as well. There's also a library up in Green Bay, which I know Brother Mitch DeVroy is involved with, and he might be a good contact if you want to go up there and take a look at the material. Now, sometimes these archival libraries, you can't check things out, but you could sit there and read, or if I'm doing research, I usually go in and scan things on my phone because most of our iPhones and Android phones, etc., can scan documents beautifully these days. There's also ritual. All Master Masons in the state of Wisconsin are permitted to receive a copy of the cipher. And this book is a primary source by which you can learn Masonic ritual. Now, you can talk to your mentor or counselor after obtaining a copy, or seek out a ritualist or proficiency man or learned brother in your lodge to begin your studies. And I'm not talking about studying to memorize the material, but oftentimes you might want to read through it, learn how to read through it, learn what the words are, so that you can understand what you went through. So you can understand what those lectures were, what that information was, so you can begin to use it in your day-to-day life. You can begin to interpret it. It's the best thing we have and the closest thing to primary source material when it comes to Masonry. You can, some lodges, have outside activities like book clubs or social events where they meet and discuss Masonry. Lake Country Lodge in Oconomowoc has one. McKinley has one up in Brookfield. There are many others. So look for things. Talk to people. Talk to members of the lodge. And if there isn't anything, find a way to start one. Many brothers have tried. Sometimes they fail. Sometimes they succeed. But put it out there. See who's going to show up. It's like Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. At the district level, your district team provides a newsletter that advertises numerous events that they arrange or coordinate for sharing information about the craft. Some examples might be upcoming degrees and meetings. Oftentimes, the degrees are helpful because you're seeing the information again. And if you're not involved in the degree, then you can pay more attention to the intricacies of what's going on. District meetings are useful because there's a lot of networking, which means there's a lot of new ideas that are being shared. There might be special social events. Specific educational events for secretaries and treasurers, of course, are always out there to learn about lodge administration. You might also find events for incoming lodge officers to learn the roles and responsibilities for each office, and sessions for new masters on lodge management, lodge calendars, etc. The district lecturer will conduct one or more schools of instruction during the year where participants will go through various ritual and degree work. And when they do, oftentimes these district lecturers will be more than happy to stop what they're doing and explain, if asked, why they're doing what they're doing. Nothing happens in Masonic ritual for light and trifling reasons. There's always a purpose to what's going on. So just ask. A lodge of instruction or a school of instruction is fantastic to get those questions answered. Hey, why do we do this? Why did they knock on the door? What's this or that mean? It's fantastic. They can also provide tips on memorization techniques, how to schedule or conduct degrees, effective presentation of lectures and charges and other things. So your district newsletter might also provide listings of educational resources. Oftentimes there are materials that are sent out to the district teams and that they will put into the district newsletter. It is as useful as the Masonic Journal. So make sure that you get your hands on it. Oftentimes, if you talk to a member of the lodge, they can get you in touch with the district deputy or whomever from the district team who can put you on the mailing list for the newsletter. In terms of Grand Lodge resources, the Grand Lodge of Wisconsin has a website which provides numerous educational and informational resources which can be accessed by lodges and individuals alike, wimasons.org. Now, when you go in there, there is a members section. If you click on that, you can put in some information, register, and gain information. A lot of the Masonic education that is available there is in that members section, is very, very useful. Of course, there's also the Further Light podcast, which, well, you're listening to now, so I assume that you're aware of it, but if you're not, listen to the Further Light podcast. You'll join the other 7 listeners. The Wisconsin Masonic Journal is a monthly publication that is a wonderful source for interesting articles and facts about Masonry. Every month, we have numerous Grand Lodge officers who are going to write columns on a variety of subjects that are there to get you thinking about things. There is the Education Committee article, which is there every month. It's 1,000 words. It's meant to be potentially read in lodge with several questions after to spark a discussion. But it's really useful information. It deals with a lot of different ideas, everything from the abstract and the esoteric to the more specific. So there's a lot of good stuff there. In terms of suggested readings, in order to learn, a Mason must read, and there's several classic works that one might want to look at. One of the most prolific and authoritative authors of books about Masonry is Albert Mackey. And he has written several comprehensive volumes about Masonry, including the symbolism of Freemasonry, the history of Freemasonry, and the principles of Masonic law. Your lodge probably has multiple copies of Mackey's work in their library. There's a 2-volume set, there's a 7-volume set, there's a few other books. The 2-volume set is the original version of the Encyclopedia of Freemasonry. The 7-volume set is the expanded version. They are both useful. See if you can get your hands on it and just read through it. I'm not suggesting that you have to go out and buy these things, but it would be useful to look through or be aware of the fact that the Encyclopedia of Freemasonry is like any other encyclopedia. You find the topic or the term and you find the information, but you're finding older information. It's like looking through a time capsule or a time machine. It's fantastic for giving you basic information about Masonry. Then there's Preston. So Preston wrote Illustrations of Masonry, which you've heard me refer to on the podcast before. Really useful information. Webb does the same, right? Also writes Illustrations of Masonry based on Preston, adjusted for the American lodges. Preston is writing for the English lodges. But they're both great reads, and both are freely available along with Mackey as PDFs through several Grand Lodges, including our own. I believe we have a digital copy of Mackey, and if we don't have Preston, we'll probably put Preston up fairly shortly. There's also Carl Cloudy, who's a fantastic writer. I believe he's out of Iowa, or was out of Iowa, and he wrote a series known as the Introduction to, so it's Introduction to the Entered Apprentice, Introduction to the Fellowcraft, and Introduction to the Master Mason, which kind of walks people through the experience that they just had in each of the degrees. And even if you've gone through the degrees 20 years ago, he does bring up points that are going to be thought-provoking and worth looking at. Now, there's numerous other resources, non-written resources. So the Short Talk Bulletins are pamphlet-style readings. They're published monthly by the Masonic Service Association of North America. And they look at numerous topics. They're put out by a wide variety of Masons from really all over the country, all over the world. Generally, the pamphlets themselves take about 10 minutes or less to read and offer interesting insights and stories on the practical application of Masonry and how it interacts with our daily lives. The Short Talk Bulletins come out monthly. Every lodge receives a copy. But more importantly, for most of us, they also have a podcast, or the podcast can be downloaded as audio files from msana.com. So go out and find their podcast. Basically, the podcast is, I believe, weekly, and they read one of the Short Talk Bulletins. It could be one from the 1930s or the 1960s, or it could be a current one. We also have lodges of research. Most states have them. In Wisconsin, it is Silas Shepherd Lodge of Research, and they put a lot of their material online. Recently, they've revamped their website, and they can be found at silasshepard.org. So that's silassheperd.org. Another great resource as we look beyond Wisconsin is going to be, for example, Midnight Freemason's blog. So if you look up Midnight Freemason, it's a blog that is run by numerous well-educated Masons throughout the country, and it covers a wide variety of topics. Really interesting reading oftentimes. There are also several Grand Lodges with great education. Iowa, Ohio come to mind. The Grand Lodge of British Columbia has a really good digital archive. Speaking of digital archives, UGLE, the United Grand Lodge of England, has a really good archive. Now, if you look at England or any other state, I need to warn you that ritual and ideas can vary. So don't get stuck in the idea that, well, they are wrong, or hey, they're right and we're wrong. Masonry is subjective. There is no specific right or wrong, unless the district lecturer is in the room. But leaving that aside, there are some fantastic websites there too that you can look at. UGLE, United Grand Lodge of England, also runs Solomon. This is an education website where they have content, written content, video content on a wide variety of subjects. It's solomon.ugle.org.uk. And even though you will see variations in ideas, in material, the basic principles of Freemasonry are the same. And sometimes seeing those other ideas may spark new ideas in yourself, new interpretations, new conceptions of how to apply Freemasonry within your life. Whatever your preference or specific interest, there is something out there for everyone. The only caution I would give you is be careful of online sources. There's numerous good websites that I have not listed here because, well, there's a lot of them. But there are also a lot of really bad websites, materials that are out there that are wrong or intentionally misleading oftentimes. If the word Illuminati shows up, I'd probably avoid it. There's several websites that I can think of that one would avoid. But at the end of the day, if you find a claim that is particularly interesting to you, make sure that it's a claim that you can find other people looking at. If it's an original idea, then it's up to you to go and seek out people who would be willing to verify and, potentially back that idea. That's how you use references academically. It's how we use references in Masonry. It's a good way to avoid confirmation bias. Avoid the idea that you get so tied into proving your case that you can't actually see that you're wrong in the first place. So just be cautious with the online materials. That being said, Google is your friend. A lot of times, the good materials tend to rise to the top. You'll find it tied to Grand Lodges. You'll find it tied to specific lodges or lodges of research, and that's usually pretty good material. So, that being said, go out and explore Masonry. Go out and find new information. Go out and develop yourself. That's what Masonry is all about. Developing the spiritual, but also developing our own secular knowledge, our own non-religious knowledge. And the best way to do either is to read other people's ideas, including those with which you do not agree. Because at the end of the day, if you understand the arguments of someone that you don't agree with, it will still expand your understanding of the topic. So go out, explore, be curious, and develop as a Mason. Thank you for joining me, Brother Chris Lidke, and the entire Further Light team on your quest to find more light through Masonry.
Are you interested in learning more about Freemasonry in Wisconsin? Visit wisconsinmasons.org to learn more about Masonry and access further educational content and more light. Once again, that address is wimasons.org. Any questions, comments, or suggestions, please email us at education@wisconsinmasons.org. And thank you for listening.